again guys, welcome back to the channel. In today's video we are taking a look at the Mario Noriega Designs Caproni-Vizzola C-22J Ventura. A little bit of a mouthful, and apologies Mario if I got your last name completely wrong there, but anyway, we're going to take a look at the aircraft. Unfortunately I was having a few issues initially between the aircraft and my computer's antivirus program, but that all seems to have been sorted out now. So we are finally able to take it on a flight, and we're going to do just that. A little bit like we did with the Iris Simulation Squad Tutor, this video won't be a full review per se. We'll be taking the aircraft on a little bit of a test flight and getting to grips with it as we go. I don't think there's too much point going into vast amounts of detail on the modelling and the texturing, as I think most would agree that the texturing, particularly on this aircraft, is rather dated. I was actually made aware of the aircraft by a viewer, and I have to say I was a little bit sceptical initially when I heard a description of the product. But I thought I'd check it out, and whilst the screenshots do make it fairly clear that again the texturing is rather dated, overall I quite like the aesthetic of the aircraft itself, more so internally than externally, and I thought at €10, let's give it a punt. I am willing to let a lot of things slide at that sort of a price. As it transpired though, the little C-22J, to my mind at least, is a bit of a diamond in the rough. As I'm sure your mother always told you, it's not what's on the outside that's important, but what's on the inside that counts. And the C-22J may not be winning any beauty pageants anytime soon, but it has a lot to offer behind the scenes. So for today's flight, if you hadn't guessed already, the Caproni-Vizzola C-22J is an Italian aircraft, so I thought it only appropriate that we took the aircraft for a little bit of a flight around the Italian mountains. We're currently on the ground on the shores of Lake Lugano, and as I say, really we're just going to take the aircraft on a little bit of a test flight around the lake. We'll carry out a full startup. I think particularly in today's video that's quite appropriate since the system's depth of the aircraft is surprisingly good. We'll do our lap around the lake as usual. We'll have a little bit of fun with the aircraft, make a few manoeuvres as we go. As usual, I'll try and give you some sort of a feel for the flight modelling, and once we've done our lap around the lake we'll then come back for a landing into Lugano. As I say, the textures are a little bit rough and ready on the product, both internally and externally, so try not to be put off initially when you see the virtual cockpit. Again, there's a lot worth waiting for in terms of the product quality. The flight modelling is really rather good, the aircraft's great fun as well, and the sounds are some of the best I've heard in the sim to date. Anyway, enough talking, let's get flying, so we'll head for the cockpit of the C-22J. So welcome to the cockpit of the C-22J. We'll take a very quick look around so that you can get a bit of a feel for the level of texturing. Overall, as you can see, it is pretty last generation in terms of the texture resolution, but nonetheless, I have to say I still think the cockpit actually looks quite nice. The modelling is certainly still up to a reasonable standard, and although some of the textures are a little bit blurry, overall the main instrument panel I think looks pretty good still, and as I say, it works for me. I actually think it has a very nice feel to it. Anyway, we'll run through the full startup as per usual, partly because, as I'm sure many of you are aware, I do like to do that, but secondly it will give me an opportunity to show you just how comprehensive this little jet systems actually are. So for the interior inspection, the pilot's seat has been adjusted, pedals have been adjusted, safety harness is secure, headphone and microphone are connected, oxygen hose not required, parking brake is set, flight controls, a little bit tricky to actually see the ailerons in the aircraft. The flight controls are full free and in the correct sense, pitot heat is off, DME is off, altitude alerter is off, radios are off, transponder is off, ADF is off, turn slip indicator is off, attitude indicator is off, lights are all off, air brakes are closed, hot air control is closed, throttle friction has been adjusted, throttles are in the idle position, and emergency throttles are both fully counterclockwise. For the start itself, the battery can come on. Warning panel lights are checked. Just test those. Engine master switches are both off. Fuel boost switches are both off. Engine test switches are both off. Landing gear lights were shown down 3 greens. And that's tested. We'll start the left engine first. It's a very straightforward start in the jet. We just have to hit the left engine start. Just make sure that the area is relatively clear. And I'm already aware there's going to be a few jokes, but there'll be no clear prop today, of course. So we'll hit the left starter. And we'll monitor the run-up. One of the real strengths of this aircraft, as you'll hear throughout, is the sounds. The sound engine in the aircraft is absolutely amazing, I would say. One of the best in the sim, if not the best. Anyway, just monitoring the N1. All pressure's coming up nicely. Just waiting for that Ryzen EGT. Which we now have, so we have a good light off. We'll just wait for the engine to spool up and stabilise. And the start-up time of the engine as well, it's really nice, very convincing. And it looks like the left engine's stable. For the EGT we're looking for below 500 degrees Celsius, which we have. RPM is checked. Oil pressure is checked. Fuel pump light is off. Oil light is off. And after start is complete. The generator is on. And the generator caution light is out. Voltage, we're looking for between 27 and 29 volts. We have 28, so that's checked. So good start on the left engine. We'll start the right and we'll head outside so that you can hear the startup sounds externally. So as you can see, we now have two good starts. We'll run through the emergency engine control box checks again just to show you the comprehensive nature of the systems. So the throttles are both closed, the left test switch can come on. Looking for the pump normal left light, that is checked on. Left emergency throttle we'll put to the clockwise position. And this is really one of the only inaccuracies I can think there probably is in the aircraft, is using the backup throttle does also seem to adjust the main throttle, which I can't imagine is correct. Anyway, we've got full throttle there on the left-hand engine. Checking the engine instruments. Everything there is within limits, so we'll come back again off the emergency throttle. So throttle's all the way back to idle, left test switch can come off. We won't bother carrying out the same on the right, obviously it's the same procedure. And for the fuel filter check, the low pressure light is checked off. Left boost pump is off. Left throttle will come up to 100%. Now we're just looking for a fuel pressure there of more than 0.95 bar, which we have. Throttle back to idle. We'll get the left boost pump on, and the same for the right. Again, we won't carry out the same check on the right hand engine. And the before taxi checks, avionics equipment can come on. So get the position lights on, attitude indicator can come on, same for the turn and bank coordinator. We'll get the pitot heat on as well. Take the COM1 radio, we'll only need that for the flight today. Transponder can go to standby. We won't need the altitude alerter or the DME, so those can both stay off. Flaps, we'll check the operation of the flaps. So we have full flap, we'll be using full flaps for the takeoff, so we'll just leave those down for now. Air brake operation. That's one of the only sounds in the aircraft I do think is a little bit strange to me. It actually sounds like someone sucking through a straw. Trim. is checked. We'll get the canopy closed up. And again, how nice are those sounds on the aircraft? I think they're really, really excellent. Anyway, we'll tune the HOTAS up first, 121175.
Lugano Airport information Kilo 05000. Wind 269er at 8. Visibility 6. Sky condition 900 feet. Scattered 5,500 feet scattered. Temperature 13. Dew point 13. UNH 29.902. Visual runway 01 in use. Landing and departing runway 01. DSR aircraft, say direction of flight. All aircraft read back hold short instructions. Advise controller, on initial contact, you have Kilo. Lugano Airport information Lima 05000.
So we'll tune up ground. I guess we're not going to bother calling ground since they're going to give us runway 01, which means we're going to have to taxi all the way down to the other end when I specifically came up here because it's a nice short taxi for us. Given the wind as well, it doesn't make any sense really that they're using runway 01, so we'll take runway 19, that's better for us anyway, we're departing out in that direction. So the park brake can come off. Just taxi ourselves up to the holding point, which is straight ahead of us. The jet does need quite a bit of thrust to get moving initially, but once it's rolling it actually taxis almost at idle thrust very nicely, which is a big plus point. And really one of my only gripes with the taxi, the manual states not to use any differential braking to tighten up the turn, but the turning radius of the aircraft otherwise is pretty poor, so I'm not sure whether that's accurate or not. Anyway, we'll come to a stop at the holding point, park brake can go back on. The before takeoff checks, flight controls are full and free. Trim is set for takeoff. Air brakes are checked closed. Flaps are down. Engine instruments are checked. They're all within the green. Flight instruments are checked. We'll just set the runway heading on the course bar. We might come back in on runway 01 later, that will save us a little bit of time on the return leg. Fuel quantities are checked, we've got about 50% fuel on board. Harnesses are secure, the canopy is locked. Get the transponder on, that can go to out. And we'll get the strobes and the landing light on. Park brake can come off. It's all clear on final. And we're all clear upwind as well. As usual, I'll just taxi us onto the runway. We'll briefly head outside so that you can hear the engine sounds at idle externally. Okay, so I think we're just about all set and ready to go. The park brake can come off. We'll hold the aircraft on the brakes. We'll come all the way up to full power. So power is set, everything's in limits, feet off the brakes, and off we go. Looking to rotate at 80 knots. Another aircraft with a pretty sensitive rudder. There's 80 knots. And we're up. So I'll tap the brakes, the gear can come up. Just lower the nose slightly. Let the aircraft accelerate up to 120 knots and then we can start retracting the flaps. There's 120 knots, the flaps can come up. There's one of the few things that doesn't seem to be animated is the flap switch. And we'll come back now. We're supposed to climb at 100% RPM, but we'll pretty much just cruise low level, so I'll come back to around 75% on the N1. Otherwise this thing really picks up pace, which obviously can be hugely to its benefit, but today's a little bit more of a leisurely cruise. And that is one of the few, I wouldn't say it's a disadvantage of the aircraft, but it's one of the few things about the aircraft that I perhaps don't enjoy so much myself. It really feels like the kind of aircraft you want to cruise around in a bit more of a leisurely pace, but obviously that's not what it's designed to do, and it does do what it's designed to do very well indeed. It's great fun to fly, it's great fun to throw around, and I suppose really the closest aircraft I could describe to in the sim is the MB339. Obviously it looks ever so slightly similar with those tip tanks, and it flies quite similarly as well. It's not hugely fast, but it's certainly speedy enough to have some really good fun and get you from A to B in a quite expeditious fashion. Anyway, we'll get the landing light off. Now we'll just hang a left, continuing down Lake Lugano. Early morning sunshine, rather in our eyes at the moment. I have to say, and I feel like I've been saying this a lot recently during my reviews, but it seems to have been the case a lot recently, the aircraft is absolutely wonderful to fly. It's got one of the nicest flight models I've come across in the sim to date. It's definitely not overly sensitive, and it's just really, really pleasant on the controls. Feels a little bit heavier than perhaps you might expect, but again, I think that's actually good. Obviously there's a lot of aircraft in the sim that are too sensitive on the controls. But everything feels very crisp and very smooth. We'll have a little bit more fun once we get down to the other end of the lake, but as you'll see, we can really chuck the jet around if we want to. Just passing over the A2 at the moment. And we'll continue northeast bound up the lake. We'll take the next right. But again, as you can hear, the sounds are really, I think, top notch. I'm not entirely sure what the real C-22's engines sound like, but I suspect a small jet engine, such as the one we have in the aircraft, would probably have quite a high-pitched whine to it. Got the town of Lugano just off on our left, and the airport's just behind us on the other side of these hills. As I say, I find around 75% N1's a pretty nice cruising speed. We're doing just a little less than 200 knots, which does still give you just enough time to take in the scenery as you go. And in this part of the world, I think it really is worth taking in that scenery. It's absolutely glorious, especially at this time of the morning. Anyway, you can see the end of the lake, so we'll head down there. Once we reach the end, as I say, we'll chuck the aircraft around a little bit. Anyway, we'll come up on the power, gain some speed and altitude, and then we'll try a spin. Just come back slightly on the throttles there. We should be climbing at 100% RPM. So we've got full climb power. As you can see, we're just dipped the nose down slightly, but we're more or less maintaining 200 knots here at the moment. We're doing about, say, 2,000 feet per minute rate of climb, so some really nice performance in the jet. As I say, it really reminds me of the MB339. It's obviously not got as much power as your F15 or your F14, but enough to really get up to altitude pretty quickly, get up some decent speed. Just climb a little bit higher before we carry out our spin. We'll do it over the ground just so I don't get completely disorientated in the process. So 5,000 feet should be enough. We'll leave the power on for now. Just give up the rest of our airspeed for some more altitude. And again, you can hear the wind noise falling off as we reduce the speed there. It's really nice. Coming back through 90 knots. You can feel the elevator's getting pretty twitchy now. There's the stall warning. And the aircraft wanting to stall. Right wing dropping. We'll come off the power. We'll let the spin develop a little first. So as you can see, really nice spin development. I'll release the elevator. You have to excuse the camera, it goes pretty crazy. But yeah, as you can see, really nice spin. A little bit aggressive on the camera movements there, but that's not really the jet's fault. And did have to feed in a little bit of rudder there just to correct the spin. So as I say, certainly one of, if not the best jet in the sim currently at the moment. I'd say it's probably on a par actually with the Irish Crop Tutor in terms of spin characteristics. So back up to 5,000 feet, we'll try a loop. We'll pitch the nose down, we'll initiate the pull up at 200 knots. So there's 200, coming back on the stick. Again, loving that wind noise. And this jet's just very misleading in terms of looks, isn't it? You look at it from the outside and it looks pretty unimpressive, but it's actually a really nice machine. It's full aileron deflection. Come back off the thrust, we'll descend back down to more or less ground level and we'll track low level all the way home. Again, as I said, just a really fun aircraft, really good fun to throw around, and also really nice to cruise in, so it's a little bit of an all-rounder in terms of capabilities. Obviously it does suffer some of the same setbacks you would expect from any jet aircraft. You're not going to be flying it in any stall environments, and you probably in reality wouldn't want to be flying it off any grass runways, but I'm sure you could get away with that in the sim. So we'll just track south-westbound back home. We'll be continuing down the lake and making the turn at the end out to the left. Bank the aircraft slightly to get us back down towards the ground. Just keeping off the throttle for now, we don't want to overspeed the jet. I think that happens around 280, 300 knots. So your top speed is a little bit limited, but that's not really surprising with that extremely straight wing. Anyway, coming back up on the thrust now. We could just jump over the hills there and go straight back towards the airport, but we'll go around the long way just so we can have a little bit more fun. Call up the tower, see which runway they're using. I suspect they're still going to be on 01. 12025. So back onto runway 01 by the sounds of it. And we are clear to land. So it'll be a straight-in approach, which is good for us. That actually means a nice short taxi once we land. Just keep the speed up till we come around the corner, and then we can start reducing back to 140 knots. Start configuring for the landing. I know this jet won't be to everybody's taste. Obviously, again, the textures are not up there with what you would expect from Microsoft Flight Simulator, but for me, this one was a really pleasant surprise. I read some good things beforehand, and certainly for the price, I think it's €10. It's such a good pickup. I would say you can't go too far wrong. As I say, I think one of the most fun aircraft currently in the sim. Anyway, just coming around the corner, tracking up to the north. The airfield's just around the corner of those hills. Come back off the throttle, start reducing that speed. Just see the Pappies coming into view there. Start trimming as the speed comes back. Not sure if we're going to get away with not using the speed brakes or not here, but we do actually use them for the landing, so it's not really a big issue if we have to take them. And I think we will. So speed coming back, that's just the gear warning horn. Back through 140 knots, we can take the gear down. So gear is down, we have 3 greens, flaps can go to full. And the flaps are down, and we're looking for an approach speed of about 95 knots, so looking good on the speed there at the moment. According to the checklist, we leave the speed brakes extended for the landing, so we'll do that. And we're a little bit low here on the Pappies at the moment, but that's fine. We're going to land near the threshold anyway, as I find this thing does like to float quite a bit in the flare. We don't want to run out of runway, and ideally we'd like to come off at the second exit on the left. Still trimming back at the moment, just to ease off on the elevator forces. Once we come over the threshold, we'll chop the throttle. And holding her off, she's a little bit twitchy in pitch, and as you can see, she does like to float in the flare. There's touchdown, we'll come straight onto the brakes. Try and come off at the second left exit. Just about managed it. That was full braking there, just to come off. And after all of our efforts, someone's taken our parking spot.
Contact ground on 119.7.
Going to 119.7 Tango Bravo Sierra.
Oh, that's a little bit rude. Anyway, we'll tune up ground. We won't call them. So we'll just make our way over to somewhere vacant to park up. After landing checks, the landing light is off. Probably should have got that on for the landing. Air brakes will close, flaps can come up. Pitot heat is off. Trim is set to neutral. And the transponder can come off. Looks like we've got a marshaller down here on our right, so we'll follow their guidance in towards the bay. Actually, it's looking as if they're catering to the little Mooney. Want to be there, so we'll just come in around the back of them. Anyway, the after landing check's complete. Slow the aircraft down for the turn. And as I say, we'll just park over the other side of this little Mooney look-alike. You can see how low we're sitting to the ground compared to the other aircraft. Anyway, we're stationary, park brake on. For the shutdown checks, park brake is applied, throttles are idle, radios are off, attitude indicator can come off, as can the turn and bank coordinator, internal lights are off, left and right boost pumps are off, waiting for the EGT to stabilise, which it has, and we'll get the engine masters off. We'll shut down the right hand engine first. So we have a good rundown on the right and the same on the left. And we have two good shutdowns. Battery can come off. And we'll get the canopy opened up again. And that's us. So there you go guys, I hope you enjoyed our little blast around Lake Lugano in the Mario Noriega Designs Caproni-Vizzola C-22J. Maybe it's only me, but as I said during the introduction, if you can get past the texturing of the aircraft, I think it's a really excellent little product. I really enjoyed the flight. The C-22J is great fun to fly. The visibility is actually pretty good as well, so it makes for a nice little sightseeing aircraft. Anyway, I'll give you a quick breakdown on what I think is good and what I think is bad. It's actually a relatively easy one for me to do today. Really, the only major negative of the product, and of course it's fairly obvious, is the texturing. Personally, I actually think the modelling is still fairly decent, reasonably up to standard. Certainly not the best, of course, that we've seen in Microsoft Flight Simulator, but I think it more than passes muster. It's really just the texturing, which again does look pretty dated. It's quite low resolution, but as I said, to my mind, I actually still think the aircraft looks pretty nice. I don't know quite how to describe it, but some developers are very good at giving the cockpit the right visual feel, and I really think that the C-22J has that, whether or not the graphics are up to modern standards. Frankly, I was having such good fun flying the aircraft that it certainly didn't bother me at any point anyway. Just about the only other negative that I can really think of for the product is a couple of the sounds were a little bit odd. But again, overall, taken as part of a bigger picture, it's certainly very tolerable when the aircraft sound package is generally great. Obviously, as I mentioned at the start, the product is only €10, so usually I'd be willing to let quite a bit slide at that sort of price point. But frankly here, genuinely, I don't really feel that I have to. The sounds, as I said, I thought were absolutely excellent for the most part, some of the best I've seen in the sim to date. The same goes with the systems. It's not the most complex of aircraft, but they're all done very nicely. The detailing I thought was excellent, minus the textures. Same goes for the flight model. As I said, I thought the aircraft flew very nicely and was really good fun as well. FPS wise, the aircraft was very good. I was losing about 4 FPS over a default aircraft, which is a little bit surprising, again given the texturing and the modelling. I thought I might actually gain some FPS if anything. But losing 4 FPS of course is no major drama. But for me, the real winning point of this product, and again it's very hard to quantify, but the ambience and the feel of this little jet are really top notch. Anyway, that's the Caproni-Vizzola C-22J. I do hope that you enjoyed the video and found it to be of use. As always, if you did, please consider giving the video a like and subscribing to the channel. If you have any comments or questions for me, you can leave those down in the comments section below, and I'll always do my best to answer them. And as always, a very big thank you to my channel members and patrons for all of your support. Hope everyone is having a great day, take good care guys, and I will see you all again soon.